Sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. Welcome to everybody, all of you who are watching live, and also you who are watching later, because I know that many of you go in and watch it. We record this session. My name is Rebecca Oliver, and I'm from Purple Ivy, and I have with me my esteemed guest, Lisen Schultz from Stockholm Resilience Center, and my colleague, esteemed colleague, Eva Normell, also from Purple Ivy. And today we're asking the question, what do CEOs need to know about sustainability? Because this is something that I know that both of you have been thinking about for a long time. And so I thought I'd ask you to introduce yourself first before we head into the first question. So Lisen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I'm a sustainability scientist at the Stockholm Resilience Center, Stockholm University. And I'm also the program director for our executive program in resilience thinking that we offer to business leaders since 2018. Where they can connect directly with climate scientists and sustainability scientists and resilience scientists and each other to understand both the challenge of sustainability and the paths ahead. So that's me.
Thank you very much. And Eva, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then maybe you can kick off with the first question, which is, why has sustainability been so difficult for business leaders and CEOs to take on board? So a little bit about yourself and then merge into that question.
Right. Thank you, Rebecca. It's great to be here. Well, my name is Eva Normell, and I'm a sustainability strategist and also one of the founders of Purple Ivy 10 years ago now. I work a lot with customers in developing and supporting them to develop sustainable strategies, and also to support them in actually finding systematic solutions to how to work with sustainable or non-financial issues within the companies. So what I see when I come and work with CEOs and with companies is that it is a bit strange and difficult for them to pick up on these questions. And it comes back to the understanding of the topics, I would say. It's difficult for them to understand because the topics within sustainability, there are so many, first of all, and also to be able to grasp them, you need to look into the future, and there is a lot of regulations, so it's a lot to kind of keep up to. And secondly, it's also difficult for them to measure because a lot of the things within sustainability are not the normal measures. It's difficult to focus on because there are so many stakeholders to listen to, and it's also difficult to organize because it touches upon so many different parts within the organization. So it is a difficult topic.
Mm. And Lisa, when you started preparing these courses, you were understanding that there was a need. Tell us a little bit about the beginning of the work that you're doing and how you realized that CEOs needed your services.
So in addition to a sustainability scientist, I'm also the founder of the Pontus Schultz Foundation for a More Humane Business. And this is an organization that I founded in 2012 in memory of my husband, who was editor-in-chief for a business magazine called Veckans Affärer. And he had driven issues like sustainability, gender equality, diversity and inclusion in business for many years. And he passed away in a cycling accident. And then CEOs came to me and said, we need to carry his legacy forward and this discussion. And we need to have platforms where we can discuss these issues on our own terms, where you don't need academic credits in queer theory to be able to discuss gender equality, for example. So we did annual seminars and handed out awards. So I had a lot of exposure to business leaders over those years. But I also felt a growing need from inside and from outside to move closer to action. So really have knowledge connected to action and not just have these annual inspirational seminars. So, and in parallel, Johan Rockström, who was my director at the time, professor at the Stockholm Resilience Center, was also in dialogues with CEOs and recognized that actually businesses are waking up to this challenge now as a core to survival and core to development of the very businesses that they lead, and that also sustainability is this moving target that you need to keep up with the frontiers of science in order to understand this. And also that the media filtration of the issues were not really making sense. They wanted to connect directly to the scientists. So that's why we decided to set up this program. We also realized that in addition to connecting to science, they want to connect to each other. They want to calibrate their action and their compass and their direction towards other business leaders, because of course an economy is made up of people, and you need to sort of set the direction together somehow. And especially if you want to change something, you need to have allies to develop that new direction. So that's why we set up the program, and we started that, as I said, 2018.
And so maybe to carry on with you, Lisen, the purpose of this is really to think about what are the sustainability is a huge topic, as Eva mentioned. So what is it that we can maybe summarize as the concepts and the kind of content, the capabilities that CEOs will need in order to really take on board sustainability so they can work with it? How have you been looking at that rather enormous question?
It is an enormous question, so I'll try to be short, and then maybe we can deepen it later. But I think the first thing is this systems perspective, getting a holistic understanding of this topic, that we move away from this, number of disconnected issues that Eva mentioned in this broad topic, create a frame within, or a narrative within which it makes sense. And for us, that narrative is that sustainability is about meeting everyone's needs within the means of the planet. And for a business leader, it's about developing a business that contributes to that larger challenge in a way that also develops the business. Because of course, a business leader is ultimately responsible to develop, a thriving business. So they cannot turn into NGOs or states or things like that. They have to do this from a business perspective. And then from that, with a biosphere and a stable climate as a basis, and the societal needs as a core, and the economy and partnerships as tools for that. From that, you can then start looking into the complexity of the world, how you can have a learning mindset, how you can work with not only your company, but your whole ecosystem of suppliers and customers and so on. And then within that, the broader ecosystem, which is all the living organisms on this planet that really makes it possible at all to have a business in the universe. This is the only place in the universe where we can do business. I mean, the planet and its biosphere around it. So you need to understand yourself as part of that larger living web, and then to be able to navigate that. So those are some of the ideas, and some of the concepts, of course, the planetary boundaries, to realize that it's not only about carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions, but all of the other things. The circular economy, what that actually means, stewardship as a new direction, and also transformation, that this is actually a big shift, and to be able to make that shift in a way that keeps the good things that we have developed so far, but also drops the things that don't work anymore, and make room for the new things that will be the new. So quite a lot of different concepts that we go through in something that we hope is a good learning journey.
Yeah, we were chatting earlier actually, and we said the phrase that the ecosystem for a business often is about suppliers, but actually one of the most important, or the most important supplier, is nature, and you would never do business with a supplier that was on the verge of collapse. So this idea of nurturing your suppliers, and so I thought that was a nice concept that we came up with in our pre-chat.
Yeah.
But I think you said something at the beginning, Eva, about the capacity to manage something complex as in the CEO role. And I was thinking that there are certain characteristics that CEOs often have that allow them to be effective in that role. And so I thought I'd pose you also a rather impossible question, which was, these characteristics that make you a good CEO, when is that an advantage for managing sustainability, and when is that possibly a disadvantage for managing something like sustainability? Because, and then maybe what are those competencies? I mean, we talk a lot about leadership, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little more.
Yeah, the first thing that I come to think about is that, I mean, generally the CEO of a company wants to deliver a result in line with the requirements of the board, right? And the first reason why the CEO has difficulty to approach these questions is probably because the board is not really requiring a full kind of looking ahead so much and new thinking as much as it needs. So I think that's one of the biggest problems, that the boards, even though they should, because I mean it's required from the boards to actually look into the sustainability perspective, but I don't think that all boards do that yet. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of things are happening here. And also when I think about what kind of requirements or what kind of advantage do they have as a leader, I think a strong leader within companies, they get a lot of result from being very focused, and a lot of the times the focus is too short to be able to capture the sustainability agenda, because the sustainability agenda is you need to focus, but because you need to understand what are the areas that you need to focus on, but you need to do it in the longer term. So I think that the short focus contra the long focus is one of the difficulties areas. And also, which I mentioned earlier, that it's, as a leader, it's easy to show the result from facts. However, when you try to target and when you try to see the long-term results, it's difficult to find the good targets, to set good targets to be able to measure it, because a lot of the times it might not be measurable in the same way, especially not in a way so that you get it monetized. It's more kind of a feeling, or you get better employment, better people within your company, or your customers like you more, but it's difficult to put money on it. So I think that's a tricky perspective. And also I think another one, I think it's easy to go for the way and try ways that you have succeeded with before. In this case, you need to dare to be and try different solutions. I think you need to dare even to go for new business solutions and new ways of doing business, and that's a big step. So it takes a lot of guts from the CEOs in this case. And it's easier from the beginning to say, well, hey, let's wait a little bit. Let's let the other ones do the work first, and we will catch up later. But I think that it's not going to be you're going to be left behind if you leave it, if you don't step up and kind of take care of it now. So you really need to step up in these questions.
So you're introducing the 5th cohort into your course this year, Lisen. What, after all that Eva has said, have you seen a change over the last 4 years? Have you seen a different approach by CEOs? What sort of language change and attitude changes have you seen? Because my sense is that a lot has happened in terms of how we talk about sustainability in business in the last, and in the wider society actually, in the last 4 or 5 years. Have you seen that reflected in the kind of people who are coming on your courses and what they're expecting and how they are asking questions, their level of knowledge, that kind of thing?
Definitely, a lot has happened. And of course, we get the CEOs who are most progressive often in this area. That's why they set aside 5 almost full days and the time to really dive into this. But nevertheless, so we had already the first year, I must say, some very progressive leaders. But I must say that the discussions have really matured. And some of the issues that were not on the table in the beginning, like the biodiversity loss, that was felt very distant in the first year. Now the last 2 years, this has been, on top of more and more people's agenda. The other thing is this notion of transformation, that this is actually not just tinkering or adapting, a little bit, but it's really about shifting, and that really requires also the capacity to sort of say goodbye to parts of the business that is no longer viable, and to do that in a dignified way that doesn't, create upheaval in the society and so on. So how you navigate that, those difficult issues are much more on the table as well. So I think that so much more has happened, and also I think it has become easier for CEOs to convince their board if they need to really address sustainability from a very genuine perspective, because they have, there's increasing regulation, of course, but it's also increasing pressure from investors and from employees. If you want to attract talent, if you want to be able to sell your services to other businesses who have signed up to, for example, science-based targets, you need to have your own targets in order and so on. So I think, the context for this has really shifted a lot in combination with the awareness that has grown among CEOs. So I see a rapid shift, actually.
So at this point, I just want to say to our audience that if you have any questions to Lisen and to Eva, do post them in the chat at the side. We have got time to answer questions in our conversation. So please post some. And I want to ask another thing that I wonder if it's one of the competencies that's challenging. But actually, part of me thinks, well, no, business is always like this. But sustainability science is evolving. It's constantly changing. It's deepening. I'm here today in Uppsala University moderating a session on climate change. I'm learning new things. I thought I understood climate change science. I'm seeing the new knowledge that's coming in. And then the discussions are all, how do we bridge that and take it into society? So it's a moving target. This idea that we know what sustainability is. Sustainability is a set of principles, and it's a moving target. How do CEOs see that moving target? Do you feel that's a extra challenge? Maybe first to Lisen and then back to Eva.
I agree with you, Rebecca, that this is something business always have to deal with. They have always been evolving in a changing world with changing circumstances. It's from markets and politics and regulations and all of that. But this really also requires to be able to keep up with the scientific developments. And I think the time between a scientific insight into policy and practice has shortened a lot. So before, it would take 20 years between a concept was invented in science, like ecosystem services, until it was actually captured and put into policy and so on. And now that is shrinking rapidly. The planetary boundaries concepts that was presented in 2009 very quickly made it to the tables of some of the CEOs and so on. So I think that to be able to really keep up with also a rapidly evolving and growing sustainability science is quite difficult, and probably requires new competencies in the staff of the companies to be able to keep up with that.
Actually,
and
I remember
the deeper insights, and not just there is an information overload. You get so many new figures and so on, but to get the narrative right and to get the larger storyline of where are we heading, I think that's where you need to work, so that you can keep the course of direction for your company and your compass, even when you live in a very volatile world. So you just don't you keep your navigation right somehow
while you update your understanding of the context. I just wanted to, the reason I interrupt, I apologize for that. I was just thinking, it was actually innovation, the way in which the Planetary Boundaries article was published by Nature. It was a completely new way of doing it. And so I'm thinking that maybe we need to also think about where the innovations need to be in order to get this new knowledge available in the format, in the way that you're describing, so that it's easy to digest. So just moving to Eva, you're a whiz when it comes to management processes. And so this thing about managing moving targets, and being able to navigate, as Lisen describes, keep the navigation while managing the fact that your goal is not where it was when you set off. Is that something that management systems are really should have in place? Is that something that you recognize? And
yeah, I think if we talk management system, just going back to what Lisen said, I think that it is difficult. What you see today in moving targets when it comes to legislations and requirements for companies, I think a lot of companies have difficulties in keeping up to the pace with the new legislations nowadays. So they are actually struggling from that perspective. And that's only a kind of legislation perspective, I think. And then they need to keep ahead of what is happening in the world. I mean, scientifically. So I think it's really difficult for a lot of companies, and they are struggling because they have difficulties in finding the right numbers to follow this. So a lot of companies are struggling with keeping ahead of legislations and what is happening actually, and how to measure it. But I think what I see is that when it comes to management systems, I think that there are ways of steering, and I think that the modern management systems are more focusing on kind of managing the goals and the targets than actually how you do things. So if you have people with the right competencies and you have a common target and focus of the company, then you can come back to to stakeholders and kind of check if you're on the right track and if you're moving towards the right direction. And that way you can have more flexible management systems as well. I think a great tool is through kind of risk thinking and risk management to look ahead and to look into more future thinking ahead. And I think that's a good tool which more and more companies are using to make themselves more prepared and resilient for what is coming. So I think there are a lot of good tools, and that there are a lot of good ways of doing it more agile than the old types of management systems.
Yeah, we have a question actually, and it's a really good one. It's from Anna Lindenfors. And so Anna writes, my perception is that a lot of focus has been on the environmental side and less on social transformations, which are also required to enable environmental transformation. And so do you feel that social sustainability and governance has increased, and where are we on that compared to the environmental side? And I'll just add on that actually, Fitch, the company working on ESG ratings, does regular surveys, and they almost always come up with the conclusion that the governance side for the ESG, the way of looking at how companies are governing sustainability, is a weak spot. And so I think you're absolutely right, Anna. What's your sense of how would you answer Anna's question? Lisen, do you want to go first? How the balance between environmental and social and governance?
Yeah, I mean, to us, these three are really not three separate things. To us at the Stockholm Resilience Center, people are part of societies and they are part of the biosphere, and you need to act as a responsible individual or organization in that broader spectrum. That said, of course, everything we do is about people. You know, it's people that we need to mobilize and help, coordinate and collaborate with, and it's people who make sense of the world and so on. And if we don't have functioning institutions and societies, it's really hard to develop the collective action needed to address common problems like shared problems like the climate issue, for example. So that's where social sustainability comes in. That actually you need that to be able to address ecological or environmental sustainability. But I think that so I think she has two parts of the question. One is the social sustainability, and the other one is around the social mobilization, social transformation, how you make that happen. And I would say that you need to address that as a whole. Like we will never manage the biosphere. We will manage people, and through that, our influence on the biosphere will change.
Yeah, and maybe I can combine, as I pass the word to Eva, with the next question. Alejandro Berros Ruiz, and I hope I pronounced that right. How can a company effectively integrate ESG objectives into its medium and long-term business strategy? I mean, this is something that we are both working with, you and I, and I think that it's a balanced question as well. For the governance maybe first, in order to do the environment and the social. So maybe you can say a few words on that to answer Alejandro.
I think what I see today is that the companies that have come further, they are maybe more working with the environmental targets as a more impact perspective and more future perspective, whilst they work with the social targets more. The companies that I've been working with, at least, I see that those are more from a risk perspective, and kind of, so there is a big difference still, I think, from my perspective, what I see from how companies are working with the environmental and the social spectrum. I think that more companies have managed to include and integrate the environmental targets to a more into the strategy than on the social, except for when you talk about the employees and attracting employees, because I think that's a very positive development of that target, and I've seen a lot of work within that for companies.
Yeah, and I think the sense, really, to come back to the core of what we're talking about here, is that the governance part is about processes, but it is about leadership, and it is about having a board of directors and a CEO who understand that ESG is not just a set of boxes that you tick. It's actually a way of doing business, and that knowledge needs to be integrated. So now I thought we got a fun last question from Astrid von Schmeling, and I think that's obviously, Lisen, you can't name any names, but I know that your course has, as part of the way in which you work, you have a bit of homework that you set your participants. So the question that Astrid asks are the trends among Swedish companies for target setting? Are you seeing them becoming sufficiently daring and transformational? Is that something that your course for CEOs helps them to be? And then maybe we'll close with a last comment about about being daring. So maybe Lisa, first, what are you seeing in target setting? Are you getting excited when your students come back with their homework?
I am, Rebecca, and I also think it's fascinating to see that once companies have set science-based targets, they often realize that they can achieve those much quicker than they had thought once they start working on it, and they take these bold, leaps of faith that we talked about before. That takes courage to actually jump on this ship. But once you've done it, you realize that it's moving quite fast. And when the Science-Based Targets Initiative, for example, they also make their goals more and more ambitious and require more and more from the companies, and so you create this ambition loop that or a race to zero, if you wish. Nevertheless, that said, companies are really good at setting targets for carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas emissions, because that's so easy to calculate, and it's very clear. It's similar to financial targets. Much more difficult with the other planetary boundaries, and this initiative on science-based targets for nature, that I think is really interesting, will help companies hopefully do that, but that's a bit further down the road, I think. And also, the Science-Based Target Initiative is about halving emissions every decade, and that's what we need to do at the global level. So that's sort of, in a way, the bare minimum, and you could argue that that's not so bold. because some of these companies have the resources to maybe go faster. So yes, I get excited, but if we look at the global emissions, we still have a long way to go before this is actually shifting at the pace it's needed. But yes, we're getting there, and it's also exciting when you see that these science-based targets are then spilling over to suppliers, and more and more companies sort of need to get in line here to be able to keep up their business. So I hope we can create that positive spin and create this alternative economy where we really do meet people's needs within the planetary boundaries.
Thank you so much. And I really hope those science-based targets for nature come, because I think that will be just as interesting for companies to start tackling. So Eva, daring and transformational targets, are you seeing them? Are we still struggling to be daring?
I see they're coming. I think that, as you said, Lisen, a lot of companies are picking up on the science-based targets, which is, and they feel it's like a competition, and they want to show what they're doing, and they're proud of it. So I think that's a great sign of that it's really moving. And I think what is important to convey to companies is that they really need to kind of reform their strategic agenda, not to become not only like a result on business, but a return on business, but it needs to be more of a creative and protective of the value that you have. And I mean, not only protecting the nature, but creating these targets so that they are protecting your company as well somehow. So rethinking here.
Yeah. Well, we've now, as I knew would happen, we filled our 30 minutes with no problem whatsoever, and we could keep on talking.
Yeah.
But I think we covered a lot of ground, and I'm really grateful to you too. You've given fantastic accounts from different ways of looking at this question, different experiences of both working with CEOs and then helping them to really take a huge step forward in understanding sustainability. So we are finished with our brown bag series for this season, but we'll be back after the summer. And write to Purple Ivy on our LinkedIn post. What do you want us to talk about? Who do you want us to interview? We are really just wanting to have conversations about the topics that really matter for all of us working with creating a sustainable future. So thank you very much. And thank you, Eva, and thank you, Lisen.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great talking to you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.